Once, long ago, in a far distant part of Europe, there lived a young man with his family who were very, very poor. They could barely afford to eat every day. Now, as it happened, the king of this land was fighting a great battle with the neighbouring kingdom, and he was calling up any able and willing fighters to join his army. So, the young man signed up. He agreed to fight. He agreed to become a soldier, and he fought bravely every day. He was superb with a sword. As the battle raged, as arrows rained down upon the soldiers, many to the right of him were killed. Many to the left of him were killed. And it so happened that his commander was killed in a volley of arrows. Well, a lot of the soldiers around him wanted to flee or surrender. But the young man stood up bravely and said, "No, no. Listen to me, men. Listen to me. We fight for our motherland. We fight for our king. Together we can win this battle. Who is with me?" And suddenly, all the men cheered and rode into battle with a newfound determined strength, and the battle was won. They had been victorious. They had killed all their enemies, and the rest had just fled. Well, when news of this reached back to the king, he was mightily impressed. And he sent for the young man to come to the palace. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to make you a commander in my army to thank you for all your wonderful service. And if there's anything I can do to thank you further, just name it." Well, it so happened that the young man had noticed the king's daughter as he came into the palace, and he was smitten. He fell desperately in love with her. So he said to the king, "Is your daughter engaged? Is she married? Is she single? Is she..." And the king said, "Well, yes, she is single, but my daughter has a very, how do I put this? A strange temperament. She has decreed that she will only marry a man who will swear to love her forever. And by forever, she means beyond death. My daughter has decreed that once she dies and is placed into a tomb, her husband must reside in that tomb with her, even if he is still alive." Well, the young man is quite shocked by this, and he hears the rumours around the palace that many men have come forward to marry the beautiful princess, but many have decided against the being buried alive with her in a tomb. But he is smitten, not just by her looks, but by her personality. She's funny, she's witty, she's clever, she's talented. Everything about this woman makes this man weak at the knees. So he says, yes, I will marry her if, and only if, I die first. She agrees to be buried alive in the tomb with me. And once the young princess has met this young man, and she sees how charming and dashing and clever and talented he is, and how passionate he is, she agrees. So they get married. Oh, what a wedding. The palace has never seen such a wedding. The celebration, the food, the dancing, it is fabulous. And all is well in the world. But if that was the end of the story, it would be a very dismal story indeed. Oh, no. Tragedy befalls the palace many years later when the princess dies and her body is placed in a tomb. And the young man, now prince, is locked in the tomb with her. Oh, he is given some sustenance. Yes, they give him 3 loaves of bread and 3 bottles of wine and only 3 candles to light the gloom in that dark, windowless cell that is her mausoleum. Well, there are a few cracks in the mortar, so that during the day a little bit of daylight glimmers in to the tomb. And the young prince sits there with his dead bride and watches as her loveliness fades away. And then the night comes, and he lights his first candle, and he nibbles at his first loaf of bread, and he drinks his first bottle of wine, and then falls asleep on the cold stone floor. And the next day comes, and he sits there and watches his bride wither in the glimmers of daylight through the cracks in the walls. And the next night comes, and he lights his second candle and nibbles his second loaf of bread and drinks his second bottle of wine to dream away his cares, and falls asleep on the cold stone floor. And the next day passes much like the others. And then his third night, and he lights his third and final candle. And he knows he should eke out the loaf of bread, but his starvation is so great, he finishes it in one go and drinks the third and final bottle of wine in no time. And as the candle is just dying out, as he's just taking his last looks at his wife in the glimmer of the candlelight, suddenly he sees something through one of the cracks in one of the walls, something moving, something slithering. It's a snake coming closer and closer to his bride. Now the young prince thinks this snake wishes to chomp on his dead wife's flesh, so he quickly pulls out his dagger and chop! He chops the snake into 3 pieces. And he sits there on the cold stone floor, looking at his bride and the dead snake and wondering, is he really going to eat raw snake? But then suddenly, out through the same crack in the wall, he sees something else moving, something else slithering. A second snake is coming forward. It comes close to the third snake and then darts back through the crack in the wall, thinking it's obviously feeling scared. But then he noticed the snake is coming back, but it has something in its mouth. The snake is carrying, 3 leaves in its mouth. And it slithers close to the dead snake. And the young man watches in fascination. What's the snake going to do? It seems to pay no interest in his dead bride. It's only interested in the dead snake, and the snake places one of the leaves at one of the cuts in its fellow snake, another leaf at the other cut, and it nudges with its head the body of the snake together and places the third leaf on the head of the snake. And all of a sudden, that snake comes to life and starts slithering and wriggling around. And the 2 snakes disappear through the crack in the wall again. The young man is astonished. And just in the final bits of candlelight emerging from the last dying candle, he quickly grabs the 3 leaves up and he turns to his dead wife and he places one of the leaves on one eye, the other leaf on another eye, and the third leaf on her mouth. And he watches, wondering, could it possibly work? And as he's saying a quick prayer in his head, suddenly his bride takes a breath and sits up, confused. The young prince explains to his wife exactly what has happened. She is aghast, astounded. The 2 run to the door and they start hammering on the door, calling for help. The guard comes to the door and says, I've told you, I can't let you out. You have to stay in there. You have to die in there with your wife. And the young princess calls out, No, I'm alive. And the guard is so confused, he rushes to get the king. Now, in no time, the king comes to the door of the tomb. And he listens and hears not only his son-in-law's voice, but his daughter's too. And he commands the door to the tomb be open. And as they make their way out into daylight, quickly the prince rushes back and grabs there's 3 magical leaves, hiding them in his hand. At his first opportunity, he gives them to a trusted servant and says, look after these, keep them safe. He explains everything what happened with the leaves and says, just in case I ever need them again, keep them on you, always. Well, now the princess is back to life and the young man is back with his beloved. All, you think, would be well. But the king remembers. He sent news to the young man's family that he had been placed in a tomb with his daughter to die. And, well, when the young man hears this, he thinks, oh no, this will be upsetting. I must take your fastest boat, your highness, and go and see my family and tell them that I am alive. And the king says, yes, certainly you must. You must both go together in my fastest ship to your family. So the ship is prepared, and the prince and the princess set sailing. But since the princess has come back to life, she's not quite the same. I mean, she's beautiful, but she's not kind anymore. She's not sweet anymore. She certainly doesn't look at her husband in the same way anymore. No, now suddenly her eyes start to wander. And her eyes wander to the handsome ship's captain who's in charge of the ship. And she starts to, chat him and flirt with him. And the more time they spend together, the more they get to know each other and get to like each other. Until eventually, the young princess says, I'm so bored of my husband. If only he was gone, we could be together. And the sea captain says, well, yes, but he's not gone. He's here. I mean, how would we get rid of him? Well, if only he had an accident, say. Like he, I don't know, fell backwards onto a dagger and over the board of the ship. And the sea captain realizes that the young princess intends to murder her husband. And he agrees to help her. So, that very night, when the princess says to her husband, oh, the moon is so high and so big, we should go out on deck and look at it. The two journey up onto the ship's deck, and while they're looking out to sea, the sea captain comes up behind the young prince and stabs him in the back and throws him overboard. And the young princess and the sea captain chuckle together and go off hand in hand. But all this is seen by the young prince's servant, and he wastes no time. He quickly lowers a rowboat, climbs in, rows off, picks up the young prince's body and drags it onto the boat. Now the 3 leaves were still in his satchel, and he places one on the young prince's left eye, one on the young prince's right eye, and one on the young prince's mouth, and suddenly the young prince breathes again, and the wounds in his back seal up, and the seawater splurges out of his body. The servant explains what had happened to the young prince, and together they row and row and row and row and row and row and row as fast as they can till they reach land. And when they reach land, they run and they run and they run until they find a farmhouse. They explain to the farmer what's happened, and he gives them 2 horses, and they jump on the horses and they ride and they ride and they ride and they ride till eventually they reach the king's palace again. When they do, the young prince rushes in a back way and runs up to the king's throne room. Luckily, the young princess and the captain were in no rush to make their way home, for they decided to do some sightseeing on the way before they return home. And the young princess says to her king, Oh, my poor husband. He was, we were attacked by pirates and he was thrown overboard. We searched and we never found him. This brave sea captain was so brave to protect me. I wish to thank him by marrying him. Well, The young prince didn't know what the princess was planning, but he knew that he had been betrayed. So he tells the king everything that had happened. And the king says, I won't believe it. I can't believe it. There's no way my daughter would do such a thing. But when he hears soon reports of his fastest ship returning to harbour, the king instructs the prince and his servant to hide in the throne room for the king to wait with his daughter. And when the ship docks, the princess is shown into the palace, and she comes into the throne room, and she goes and sees her father, and she says, oh father, oh, such a terrible thing befell us. We were attacked by pirates, and my beloved was killed and thrown overboard. Oh, how I miss him. But oh, this sea captain was so brave, so kind. He looked after me. He was so good. I wish to thank him. If only you'd grant us permission to marry. And the king thinks for a moment and says, yes, you must marry, you can marry, but you should still journey to your last husband's family and explain to them everything that's happened. Will you do that, my daughter? The princess says, yes, I will, as long as I can go with my husband. And the king says, yes, brave sea captain, you of course must go with my daughter to her old love's family. So the two go back to the ship, and once it's refreshed with supplies, they sail off. And the young prince and the servants come out from their hiding place and say, but why? You know she's lying. You know it's not true. Why have you let them go off together? And the king says, they want to be together forever. So they will be. Come with me. And the king and the prince and the servant go up onto the battlements to watch the ship with the sea captain and the treacherous princess sail away. And the king says, they want to be together forever, and they will be. For I made sure that ship was full of holes. And as that ship sails away, the young prince notices it sink beneath the waves, where the princess and the sea captain can be together forever.